This is a video on the paradox that the truest truths and the realist realities are expressed and talked and dealt with by humans only in fantasy and fiction and uh, other worlds of time or space. The social sciences, the natural sciences, we tell lies and exaggerations to each other. Where we tell the utter truth to each other is in fiction, where we can pretend that this is not real characters and not a real story that actually happened, or comedy, where we're making fun and deliberately exaggerating, therefore you don't have to take what we say and be hurt by it, or history, where all the actors have been dead for 200 years, so we don't have to really attach any blame or embarrassment or shame to anything that happens. Or fantasy worlds like Martian Chronicles, where all the black people leave the Earth to go to Mars because they gave up on getting a fair deal by treatment by white people, which doesn't bother anybody because it's a science fiction story about Mars and Earth centuries from now. So anything remote from reality on a formal basis becomes the place where we get to the most real realities that are there today. And that's that interesting paradox. And so there's real tremendous power in comedy at the workplace. Um, First of all, comedy is about puncturing pomposity, and workplaces are almost nothing but pomposity, primarily because they're males, and males are almost nothing but pomposity. Males have a hormonal machine inside them that drives them to lifelong status fights, and they are so subtle that everything is a matter of ranking and status and comparison to them. Ranking, status, and comparison. Rankings and green peas and neckties and cars and car length and car width and car height and car color and car expense and headlight brightness. It's all this urging each other to be better than each other, looking for a kind of importance which this world never affords. It's a delusional race toward importance in a situation where importance is ungettable, and it's sort of monkey-like. It's uncivilized and boring and embarrassing, and most men cannot extract themselves from it, and they're hopeless. And comedy is where you reveal the monkey under the pretend man, and show that the monkey is 90% of the week working for rank, and only 10% of the week doing enough care of anybody else to justify the rank games they play and love the rest of the week. Uh, Powers of history. We can admit how deluded and selfish and narcissistic elites were, and how for centuries elites ruined entire civilizations. Now, we can't say that about Harvard and our elites today. Oh no, that couldn't be true. We don't. Harvard doesn't generate evil people. No, no. The fact that it creates hobby wars, the fact that $13 trillion was stolen from Americans and the world in 2008, mostly by Harvard University Chicago Milton Friedman lovers. Oh no, that's not evil. That's just professionals lacking adequate data or something, getting lost in their models, a simple mistake. So you steal $20 from a convenience store, you go to prison for a year, you steal $13 trillion from the baby boom generation's retirement, and nobody goes to jail, not a single executive. The powers of history is we are able to make those judgments about evil and greed for people 200 years ago that we're unwilling to make today. The power of fiction. Japan has a rich fiction tradition of business fiction because that's where people spend most of their life. And that's because more of each person is allowed into the workplace in East Asian cultures than in Western cultures. And, uh, and therefore you can have rich, interesting, emotional, and social relationships in a Japanese Oriental business environment that you can't have in a Western one because there's so little of the person present at work, and they're only using that place for utilitarian purposes, and they aren't fully humane in there. And so you have very little fiction about the workplace. Interestingly, British have lots of comedies about business because in British values, business is a vulgar occupation at the bottom of the social respect level. Whereas in America, business is worshipped, and therefore very few comedies about the office and business in American culture. The power of philosophy. We talk about profit and loss, debt and greed, leadership and followership, without having anything coherent underneath their definitions. Most of what we say is entirely circular about these things. And when you philosophers parse them very seriously and to see whether anybody's saying anything actual or not. And of course, most philosophers discover they aren't saying anything actual. And philosophy, in that sense, gets your brain a chance to think very clearly about things. If you've never taken 4 or 5 professional philosophy courses in a great college, your brain probably is fundamentally sloppy in ways that ruin your chance for effectiveness. Um, so we have comedy, we have history, we have fiction, we have philosophy. Um, if you look at the true truths that are there that we can never say in social sciences or in academia or in politics or in face-to-face life, if you look at the true truths there, what power do you get from it? Well, you end up emotionally standing outside of the culture you were born into. You were born male, but you no longer like males and react malely. You were born American, but you no longer like Americans and react Americanly. You were born technology nut, nerd, liking technology, but you no longer like your own liking of technology and you no longer like your own lostness in devices. You escape your initial factory settings as a human being. You escape the effect of 20 years of being raised by a particular set of parents in a particular community, in a particular nation, and as a particular gender. You escape all of that. And then if you work really, really hard for 30 years, at the age of 55, you become an adult. That is, when people interact and look at what you notice and what your reactions are, from your noticings and reactions, they cannot tell where you were raised. You no longer react like a male. You no longer react like an American. You no longer react like an intellectual elite. Uh, you're, you've self-built yourself so that you no longer are what your initial factory settings made you to be. And this requires taking well-practiced routines that were put in you while you grew up, so you weren't even aware of the routines you were picking up, and unpracticing and filling them with other newer routines that you practice. So that the cultures of genders, devices, people, eras, nations aren't your cultures. You stand outside of them, and gives you enormous power, enormous power. And you can deliver truth because you can see the truths. And you can use comedy. Just one nasty, well-designed, well-placed joke can turn a psychopathic, greedy vice president's violation of decency standards with other people into a permanent brand, part of their brand. And they become a synonym. Their name becomes the most common way people refer to that kind of greedy, selfish narcissism. Just one good joke, and jokes travel immensely fast. If the joke is funny and accurate and good enough, within 2 or 3 days, 10,000 people will be repeating it to each other. And that vice president's brand will be permanently a symbol of a certain kind of psychopathic greed, and not at all what that vice president would want their brand to be. Um, well-designed jokes are also well-earned jokes. In other words, the violation of norms of decency is so terrible in most business behaviors by most male monkeys that calling them on that and calling them from below, you're not allowed as an employee to point out vile lies, distortions, and unfair treatment by executives. But you can tell jokes, and if they're accurate enough, and if they capture the way other people were mistreated too by this bozo, they become a permanent part of this person's brand. And now on the internet, it follows them the rest of their career in every company. And if the imagery and the naming of the key punch phrase of the joke is a good enough set of words in the language you use, there will be no pithier, no more effective, quick way to convey the essence of this person than that joke. And you can't escape it unless you have to generate something as true, as well expressed, with as much punch to it. And unless you've got really good truths that people missed to capture in a positive joke, uh, then the accurate stuff, the reality of you is going to be captured in the reality of good jokes and become your brand for the rest of your life.